Hi everyone, I'm Philippe Botteri, partner with Accel based in London. Accel is a global venture firm and we invest both at the early and late stage. And of course, we love SaaS and we have invested more than $5 billion globally in north of 250 companies, including, of course, UiPath, but also DocuSign, Slack, Atlassian, Dropbox, and many others. I'm very happy to be here today with Thomas Hansen, the CRO of UiPath, and we'll discuss how to adapt your sales processes during COVID. We'll touch upon hiring, comp plans, team dynamics, and how to close big deals. But before jumping into the meat of the discussion, Thomas, could you tell us a bit more about yourself?
You bet. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. So my name is Thomas Hansen. Although I'm based in Seattle in the US, you may gather from my accent that I'm not born in the US. I'm born and raised in Copenhagen, Denmark. I haven't lived there for just over 25 years. I've lived and worked over the last 25 years in Denmark and many years in South Africa, as well as in Turkey, also in Thailand, and now 11 years in the US, in Seattle, all along. I'm married to a Dutch South African. We have 3 kids with quadruple passports, so we are very confused people. My entire career has been in tech, and for more than 20 years in various shapes and formats of software and cloud.
Oh, thanks, Thomas. It's a very interesting background, many countries and many experiences. It will be interesting to see how that's kind of impacted your thought process. So maybe just to get the discussion going at a higher level, like what changes have you seen the pandemic bring to the cloud sales processes, and do you think they will last?
Well, the world has certainly changed a lot over the last, now almost 8-9 months. I would say the first big change is, for most companies in the software and in the SaaS space, I've seen more companies, including mine, focus a little bit more on existing customers, making sure those customers are truly adopting and leveraging the technology they're paying for, and working with those customers to drive success. So over time, we can cross and upsell, expand those customer relationships. Now, in our company, and I think in many others, there's of course still a large focus also on landing new clients, net new logos. The techniques to do so are very different. There's no longer face-to-face engagement. There's no longer industry events. There's no longer company-driven events. So one has to be creative, and one has to think about, how do you work with potential new clients? How do you reach them? And how do you connect with them in their heart, in their mind? I think it's challenging for everyone, however junior or senior you may be in terms of the role that you do, to sit on Zoom calls or whatever technology you use every day to do so. You know, doing 10, 15, 20 Zoom calls a day over a workday of 8, 10, in some cases longer working hours, it's tough. And for the customers, for the prospects, it's the same thing. So it's important not to get caught up in all the geekiness of technology, but also just connecting with people. Remember that we are all in this together, and remember to connect with people in a different way, with them personally, so they actually engage. That they don't zoom up and sit instead and do their Amazon shopping whilst listening to a pitch they don't care about, but actually connecting to people. So they really are interested in having that conversation into a camera, into a microphone. So yeah, the world going forward, I don't think we're going to return to, if you like, what is normal. I just don't see it. I think we're going to arrive at a new normal, Philippe. And I'm sure you've heard that from many of the companies you work with.
Yeah, the question is, what is the new normal? Like everyone says that there is going to be a new normal, but it's not clear exactly what this new normal is gonna look like, because I think what we're seeing right now is that you can use technology to fill a temporary gap. Meaning you cannot meet people for 6, 8, 12 months. You're going to do it on Zoom, but because a lot of these people you have met in the past. So when you project the next couple of years, like what is the new normal for you?
I think there's a couple of fundamental changes in the sales process. Number one, when we get to the point of reopening offices across the world, I don't see a classic return to offices for those that were, for most roles that were classically office bound. I think we'll see a far more flexible way of working being enabled, where for those folks that were office bound, well, they may still go to an office, but it may only be 1 or 2 days a week. And for the rest of the time, having flexible work arrangements where you can work from home or from wherever you prefer to work. I think what we're learning through the pandemic right now is that for most roles, candidly, it's okay. It's actually quite workable. For many, it's actually preferable to work from home or at least have some flexibility. So that's the first thing I think will fundamentally change, that a number of roles will be in a far more flexible work style. And even for some, entirely be able to work from home with only really just a connection point in the office to make sure that you get that human fabric, perhaps once a week or twice a week, connect with your colleagues and feel human again. So I think that's the first big change. Then secondly, if you're an investor in airline stocks, I don't mean to send you selling all your airline stocks, but listen, I think most of us, if not all of us, myself included, will not travel as much as we did before the pandemic. I'll give you a couple of practical examples. One, I think some parts of the sales process, pre-sales as an example, largely post-pandemic, can be done remotely. I think the notion, which in the past saw pre-sales, specifically in enterprise class setting, traveling to the customer site, it's just no longer valid. I mean, most pre-sales motions can be managed far more effectively and actually at the customer's preference remotely. So to me, that's one example. Secondly, for me personally, I just ask myself some of the things I thought in the past one had to do. I had to do face to face, getting on an airplane and getting out there and doing it. I'm just not sure it's required anymore. I'll share with you one quick story. In UiPath, we went through the process quite recently of hiring a new, very senior leader, actually our managing director for our business in EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa. We shortlisted one candidate who at the time worked for Salesforce, running their business in APJ based out of Singapore. And he went through a process of meeting a dozen or so of my colleagues, including me. He and I, we met on Zoom calls and WhatsApp and so forth, I think 5 or 6 times through the process. And in the past, I would never in my wildest fantasy have conducted a process like that entirely remotely. But we made it work. And we make it work by being creative and putting in a little bit of extra effort on references and getting to connect. But I think when you think about interviewing, for example, going forward, well, you probably want to see a little bit more of a person face to face. But do you need to do it as heavily face to face as you did it in the past? I don't think so. So I think technology and just the learnings we're going through together as people over the past 8-9 months is telling us that we can work in different ways going forward when we get past the pandemic, hopefully sooner rather than later.
So at a high level, if you say like, how much were you traveling? How much of your time were you traveling before the pandemic? And how much do you think you're going to travel after the pandemic? Like in client-facing activities?
For me specifically, personally, I was probably spending roughly a third of my time traveling for client, customer, and partner activities. That I could see easily reducing by a third to half. Not that I would do fewer meetings. I probably would do more meetings, but I would do more than remotely leveraging video conferencing, leveraging Zoom or whatever technology you use. For my sellers, I think something fundamentally has changed. You know, there's always been this question around where do you put the line between an inside sales go-to-market engine and conventional field sales or enterprise sales in the field. We've surely learned over this past almost a year that it is possible to engage with very large clients, the largest clients remotely. And I think when we return to the new normal, my personal belief and my action for my go-to-market is we are going to move the line up in terms of where do you draw the line between inside sales and field. And secondly, we're also going to be embracing more of a what I would call a hybrid model, whereby you will find in that middle of the market, sellers are supposed to be 4 weeks out traveling every month. It may be one condensed week a month traveling and 3 effective weeks from an office or working from home or combination thereof, doing it leveraging online tools like Zoom.
Nice. So you mentioned one of the examples you gave, which I thought was very interesting, is hiring a senior sales leader just virtually on Zoom. So many companies have to hire on Zoom at all levels right now, and it's pretty tricky. So how do you change your hiring process and just to make it work virtually and making sure that you're still hiring the right person, maintaining the right culture?
I have to be candid and say, for me personally, not having that physical face-to-face interaction is challenging. And there's a read on people that can be very hard to do over an online call. So across all levels, we are hiring. I would say the one big difference, besides doing perhaps a little bit extra calls with the possible candidate with potential hire, the one thing that's changed is there's always been reference calls. But I think the diligence that now goes into reference calls and being far more creative in reaching out to the candidates network in unconventional ways, that's the big change. And there's nothing like people that know the person and has worked with the person that's going to give you an honest read on it. So to me, that's the single biggest change in really thinking creatively around how can you reach folks in the candidates network that can give different perspectives on the candidates. The thing that's very hard to really get a good read on is the intangible, the DNA of the person and how that aligns to the company's culture and values. And that's where creative reference taking can really help a lot. That would be my one big change in the process that I would say stands out to me across all levels we're hiring for.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I assume that by references and going deeper, you mean not only calling the 3 person that the candidate sends but just trying to dig into your personal connections to get the real read on the person, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, calling the candidates self-promoted 3 references, that's of course something one should do. That's probably not the best, most interesting read you get. The interesting read you get is when you leverage your network and your colleagues' network and friends of friends. That's where you get the interesting reads and sometimes get some perspectives where you sit back for a moment and ask yourself, should we really hire that person? Now, in those situations where you get mixed feedback on a candidate in the final stages of a process, my personal belief and what we try to follow at UiPath is then you got to call the candidate and you got to share the nuanced or perhaps negative feedback that you've gotten on the candidate and see how the person responds to it. That's also where you really get a read on the person's core values, their integrity, their transparency, their self-awareness, and just their honesty. So that I've had experiences of a few times over the past period, which has been pretty eye-opening. Actually, in one situation led to one person not getting hired.
Wow, that's super interesting. And I'm sure like all the people listening to this, I think I'm going to put that into practice. So we talk about the sales processes, and you say, well, you can be more productive when you don't have to travel and you do your 15 Zoom calls a day. But in particular, in the case of inside sales, they get a lot of the energy of being together in a room and hearing the phone rings and the bell is ringing every time a deal is closed. That creates the motivation. When you're at home, sometimes with the kids running around. How do you maintain that connectivity and that motivation, especially for salespeople? Because I heard that it's very hard.
Yeah, you're right on. What you're hearing is the truth. I think specifically for inside sales, it's very challenging. Now, it just happens to be for large portions of our inside sales in UiPath, it's earlier career folks. That's an Americanism for younger people. And, you know, it's amazing when you're young and you don't know better, you make it work. You just make it work. And yes, the kids or the dogs or cats or whatever other pets you have may be running around, but you still find a way of making it happen. So, look, perhaps we're just very lucky or blessed in the case of UiPath, but we found that we've been able to not only maintain the sales productivity for our inside sales engine so far, but we've also seen that we've been able to increase the average deal size, and we've been able to land some initial logos with a larger value. So the big question, of course, is now that we're starting to see signs of, call it wave 2 in a number of countries around the world, with the possibility that we may all be working from home for another, who knows, perhaps 3, 6, 12 months. For how long can we keep it up? That's the big question. So my 2 cents on it is, and I'm kind of laughing at myself saying this here, but you got to make sure that you communicate to the teams. You got to make sure you connect with the teams, with your folks in your team. Now, the reason why I'm laughing is, well, that kind of means that you, in many cases, do another Zoom call, which perhaps is the last thing that anyone wants right now. Yeah. But you got to find some creative ways of connecting with people, talking about something else, about how many calls have they made, what's their sales, what's their pipeline, you name it. But creating some fun, a few moments of getting out of the work mode and enjoying life in different ways with the colleagues. And there's some wonderful creative ways that one can do that. I continue to see really inspiring ideas on, for example, LinkedIn from folks in my network that hey, I adopt, I steal. I mean, wonderful ideas, and yeah.
Do you have a couple of examples, like you've done Zoom drinks with your teams, or, I mean, that's not a great idea, but I mean, many people have done that, but like any things that people haven't heard of that you found and thought was pretty helpful?
Oh, I'm going to give you my favorite example. Doesn't cost a lot. It costs a few $100 or a few €100. There's this super cool app called Cameo. It gives you access to famous TV stars, musicians, sports personalities, you like it. And depending on their level of fame, you can ask them to go and record a 1-2 minute video for you. It costs anywhere between $20 to $1,000, depending on the fame level of that person. And you get someone to personalize a video like that for a team event, and it blows people's minds when you suddenly see a super famous football or soccer player or a singer or someone from a TV show that comes out and gives a pep talk or makes fun of someone in the team for, in a positive, fun way. So that for me has been one. I'm not sure how broadly available it is across Europe, but to me that's been super fun to do in the case of the US.
That's a great idea. We'll try that for Accel. Well, Thomas, I know we only have 50 seconds left, but maybe just a quick last questions. Any changes in your comp plan to adapt to this period? And then any general advice you would give to this audience before we leave them?
We in our company have been a little bit more generous in driving short-term, 1 quarter at a time spiffs than we perhaps would have been traditionally in the company. And we do that to create some short-term energy, some excitement, and extra opportunity to make some extra money. We haven't in here made any comp plan changes. Like any other company, as we are looking and planning for our next financial year, we are thinking about comp plan changes, but more in line with company strategy and less of a response per se to the pandemic. But look, I believe that there's nothing wrong in being a little bit short-term in your approach as a sales leader, as a go-to-market leader. Listen, the only way you print a license as a sales leader to focus on the longer term is by delivering today, one quarter at a time. So I encourage you, be a little bit, tactical, get into the detail, be creative, create something, get the team excited, and then you'll deliver a quarter and then next quarter. And hey, if you're a sales leader, that prints your license to be involved in the longer term. And if you are a founder, CEO, what a great way to continue growing the business that you built.
Well, thank you, Thomas. It's I love the way you concluded this. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Take care.